Hello, Peter from Universal Dork, back once again. And today, I wanted to talk about a couple films that I'm a pretty big fan of from the motherfucking Coreys, and that is Corey Haim and Corey Feldman. So I've always been a big fan of them because they've been a pretty big part of my childhood growing up. I have a sort of kinship that I feel with the Coreys. They sort of make me feel comfortable in a weird way. Today I want to talk about not Goonies or Gremlins or even the first Lost Boys. Today I want to talk about a couple movies that I think are overlooked gems that star the two of these guys.
The Watchers.
And one that I feel got a lot of hate for some reason.
Lost Boys, The Thirst.
Starring Corey Feldman and Jameson Newlander, the original Frog Brothers. I'm here to tell you that this is a pretty damn good sequel, and the best one that you're going to get. If you're looking for a sequel to the original Lost Boys, The Thirst is actually sort of an overlooked gem in my opinion. I'll probably get trashed here for this. A lot of people didn't like this movie. I actually showed it to some Lost Boys fans a couple years ago. I kind of had to force it upon them to get them to actually accept watching it because there was a movie called The Tribe that came out before this. It was the first sequel and it was just god-awful. It was basically a retelling of the original Lost Boys. It had Feldman in it for a couple quick cameos, and it also did have Corey Haim in it too, in a very curious post-credit sequence if I remember correctly. What I'm trying to say here is a warning though. I am not talking about The Tribe. I am talking about Lost Boys The Thirst. But first, let's get around to Corey Haim's classic horror gem, Watchers from 1988. So I've got the VHS copy of The Watchers here, and for years I was trying to track down an actual DVD version of the film. And it really, from what I remember, it only exists as a double feature DVD with the first movie, this one, as well as Watchers 2 that stars Mark Singer. Now, never was a big fan of the second one. I feel like it's basically sort of a shoddy retelling of the first. I like that Mark Singer, the Beastmaster, stars in that movie, but it was pretty much a big letdown. And then we move on to part 3, which was essentially a Predator ripoff. And I love Predator ripoffs, but part 3 didn't quite do it for me either, especially being a big fan of Predator, the first R-rated movie that I ever saw in the theater back in 1987. I snuck into the theater with my friend Dave Park. We bought a ticket to one movie and then made a beeline when no one was looking, went into Predator, sunk into our seats, and watched one of the best movies of the 1980s. It blew our frickin' minds that night. I'll never forget it. To me, the memory of it is sort of like I was going on a theme park ride or something at Disney World for the first time. It was such an incredible experience, and seeing the Predator in the flesh on the screen there, when it took its mask off, I will never forget it. Those special effects always stuck with me. That movie, I would say, is probably the perfect horror, sci-fi, adventure, action film. And there's so many films out there that tried to capture that magic that failed miserably. Watchers 3, one of them. Watchers 4, however, Watchers 4 is my recommendation for the Watchers franchise. Watch the first Watchers with Corey Haim, and then watch Watchers 4. Got that right here. You can see that. There's a VHS copy of Watchers 4, directed by John Carl Buechler, one of my favorites, who's a insanely talented practical effects artist who's brought to life so many wicked creations to the screen that I love so much. This one stars Mark Hamill too. Yes, Luke Skywalker. So it's also got that star power, and it sort of gives me that comfort as well. Seeing Mark in the role here, starring in this one, is a real treat. So this one's better than The Last Jedi if you're looking for something from Mark Hamill. So these two are great. Get this one and then follow it up with this one. These two have a similar vibe to them story-wise. Of course, the super intelligent dog is in both of these movies. So that's one thing I'll say. If you're a dog lover, the Watchers series is going to be right up your alley because this features a highly intelligent canine that Corey teams up with. And let me say, first of all, as far as Corey Haim goes, this is classic Corey right here. This is Corey in his freaking prime. So we've got Corey Haim here with, his acid wash, rolled up jeans. He's got his gigantic sneakers on, his gigantic basketball shoes with the tongues hanging out. They're untied. He's got his crazy red hair in this, all moosed up. Corey in this movie, to me, feels a bit like Sam in The Lost Boys. So at any moment in this film, it would not feel out of place to me if the Frog Brothers suddenly showed up and started helping Corey Haim as he's on the run from a deadly creature that escaped from a highly experimental, top-secret government lab. The premise here is we've got Corey Haim as a pretty happening teenager, of course. A dog randomly arrives into his neighborhood. He takes the dog in. Very quickly, he discovers that this dog is more intelligent than most human beings, which is not surprising even in today's standards. Pretty soon, it becomes evident that the dog is wanted by the government.
The dog's still telepathically linked on a biofrequency that only the Oxcom can receive.
They have been doing tests and experiments on him, and Corey quickly figures this out.
GH3? They're called. You're a research animal. That's why you're so smart.
And they have no choice than to go on the run from these wicked government agents. But that is not the only thing that's on their trail. Nope. There is also a vicious creature skulking around every corner, searching for this dog. And this dog in this movie and Corey have a really sweet relationship together. He refers to the dog in the film as Furface. So I really dig movies, especially from the 80s, that have going on the run as part of their plot. Something about that, being in danger, having to hit the road, and that is a big part of the plot of The Watchers. So Corey and his canine golden retriever sidekick, best friend, Furface, are forced to do exactly that. They go on the run together, looking over their shoulder, wondering who or what is going to be appearing to try to kill them. Much like a movie, say, for instance, like Terminator, at points has that similar impending doom, some incredible supernatural force that's tracking you down and having to prepare yourself for the inevitable, meaning you are going to have to face this thing. Now, luckily, the two of them have each other. They become inseparable, and we've got a great little dog-centric horror film to enjoy. The bad guy in it, played by Michael Ironside, so he always plays a really solid villain. You also get a pretty sweet little cameo from Jason Priestley here in his younger teen years, and he gets a little monster action as well. He's riding around on a BMX bike, him and a group of friends. This movie has sort of a Amblin-style feel to it, and that's one thing that I adore about this so much, is that style of kids in danger type movies of the 80s, and this one has that to a T. If you're a fan of that stuff like The Gate and films like E.T., it really does have that spirit behind it, and Corey's presence here gives it that Amblin authenticity to me perfectly. Now, this is a monster movie, creature feature, my favorite genre of horror. It has this creature in it that's actually pretty well done with practical effects. The only problem is he sort of looks like a moron. He is a very moronic looking, almost mutant orangutan style monster. They give him a pretty interesting face. He's actually sort of small, and at the end of the film, when you actually see him, he's sort of in shadows a lot of the film, so you're expecting this monstrous, gigantic, almost predator-like creature. And I'm not going to say that it's disappointing when you see him, but he's a very kind of dumb-looking monster that's brought to life very well with some really great practical effects. So that's a funny thing about The Watchers, is the threat when you finally see him. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd be scared as fuck if I saw this thing in the woods. And I turned a flashlight on or opened my car door, and the creature of this film, which is referred to as the Oxcom, it's an outside experimental combat mammal. The Oxcom in this film is a moronic-looking, bit of a numbnut-looking style character, and I love every second of that. Numbnut monsters are A-okay with me. So there's some pretty good monster action at the end. There's some great prepping to fight this thing. They're in the woods. I'm a huge sucker for wilderness survival movies, and this sort of combines those all together. This film is based on a Dean Koontz novel. I know a lot of people out there think Dean Koontz is a hack, but there was also another film that was based on one of his books called Phantoms. I believe is a 90s film. It's been a while since I've seen that one. I would really like to revisit that, because I remember really enjoying that film as well. So, hey, maybe Dean Koontz deserves a little bit more credit here. I should take some time and read one of his novels, but it's been a while since I've read a book. So that may never happen again. The director of Watchers is this guy named John Hess. Now, he's done a couple other films that I've seen. Alligator 2 from 1991, kind of a fun one, not nearly as good as the first. The original Alligator from 1980 is just an incredible film. He did another movie that I'm curious about that I checked out on Letterboxd when I typed his name in to see what else he was responsible for. This movie called Lawless Land from 1988 looks somewhat promising. Space Killers, aka Not of This World from 1991. Reading a little bit more about that, 1950 small town monster movie. I love those. I just watched Slither the other night. Gave that a rewatch. The James Gunn movie from 2006 or 2005. That thing is a great time as well. That's aged quite nicely. Some of the digital effects were a little shoddy, but it was the mid-2000s, and that's sort of what was going on. In fact, most of that shit's going on now, and I've just got to accept it. And then this other film that looks very promising to me that kind of ties in with the whole concept today is this film from 1998 that John Hess did. I've never seen it before, but it stars Rick Springfield, which sign me up for that. And also has Corey Feldman in it. It looks like it's somewhat of maybe a ripoff on Starship Troopers or something like that, but I don't really care. You got Rick in there. There's a monster on the cover that looks kind of cool. And then you've got Corey Feldman in it as well. Sign me up for Legion 1998. That'll be on my list very soon to check that out. So, wrapping that up, I highly recommend Watchers. The DVD combo with Watchers 2 was always quite expensive on eBay. I know that one of the Blu-ray companies somewhat recently decided to release Watchers 2 only on Blu-ray, my least favorite of all of the Watchers films, so I am crossing my fingers that someday someone will put this Corey Haim cult classic, one of his best movies, on Blu-ray. And in fact, I'm probably not going to watch this movie again until it gets that Blu-ray that I want. I want to see this thing all cleaned up. Can't recommend The Watchers enough, especially if you're a fan of the two Coreys or Corey Haim. This is one of his best. A truly charming little creature feature. Check this shit out. Now, we've got bigger fish to fry and harder things to sell, which is Lost Boys: The Thirst. This is a very hard sell to people. I've been kind of going on a campaign over the last few years to try to get this film a little more recognition and a little less hate, because what I've found out is most people don't even really realize that Lost Boys A had a sequel, The Tribe, which totally sucks, do not watch that one, and that it actually was given much more solid sequel in Lost Boys: The Thirst that gives people exactly, for the most part, what they were always hoping for from a Lost Boys film. And that was not a new cast of characters like they did in The Tribe, retelling the same old fucking Lost Boys story with some new numbnuts in the role of the iconic characters of that first movie. That's what they attempt in there, and they give Corey Feldman this stupid little cameo. And the whole time I was watching that film, I was thinking, what the fuck are they thinking here? Been waiting for a sequel to Lost Boys for a long time, and I'm watching it, and Corey Feldman is given some really, I feel it was sort of disrespectful to even give him a cameo. So you can see I've got the Lost Boys: The Thirst DVD here, former rental from a video store, which is kind of cool. I'll probably take this one and put it out on my dollar cart. I've got a cart of $1 VHS and DVDs outside, and then I'll probably try to convince someone to give this a shot. I mean, for $1, how can you go wrong? This starts right off the bat with the Frog Brothers. They're teamed up. I guess at this point maybe more like known in underground circles as the people that you might hire to take care of a vampire threat. There's way more vampire infestations in the United States, and they're in Washington. They're taking down this evil senator who is a half vampire. He's trying to become a full vampire. The Frog Brothers are there. They're on the case. They're kicking ass. They've got great chemistry. Both Jameson Newlander and Corey Feldman slide perfectly right back into their roles. Corey's got his traditional look. I really like the opening. It's fun. Alan Frog ends up having to drink some vampire blood, and he himself becomes a half vampire. So that's the drama that's taking place between Edgar and Alan Frog, the unthinkable happened. Fast forward a bit, we see Corey Feldman. He's down on his luck. Edgar Frog living in a mobile home near a beach. He's getting eviction notices. He doesn't have any money. He's having to go sell his precious comic book collection that we know he loves so much just to make ends meet. But lo and behold, a mysterious vampire novelist, she reaches out to him and has a job for him. Her brother went missing, and she wants Edgar Frog to go rescue him. The only problem is apparently he's hanging out in these underground raves where this head alpha vampire, DJ X, is running the show. There's this thing called the Thirst that's transforming people into vampires. So Edgar agrees to this mission. He tries to get Alan Frog to join him, but he's still struggling with this vampire infection that he's currently got. He's very confused. So Edgar does it alone. He's got a new buddy in this movie. I think it's this girl right here. She works at the comic book shop. She's a good friend of his. She helps him out a bit. This woman, I'm not sure who maybe this is the horror novelist, if I remember correctly. I don't know why they just didn't put both of the Lost Boys, Edgar and Alan Frog, on the cover. Feel like in the 2000s, I mean, this was 2010, and they're still doing this sort of Scream style thing. I don't know why that was such a big thing with, Scream having everyone standing there thinking, wow, that's the greatest cover, as people just fucking standing there in a row. Kind of got on my nerves after a while. So if someone did re-release this and give it a better Blu-ray release, I would say you give it a new cover, put the Frog Brothers on it, take these, nothing against these two ladies here, but I mean, do we really need them on there? They're not selling it. So hopefully someone will give this a better Blu-ray release. Mine I got for $5. You can't go wrong there. But he agrees to this mission and heads out to this island in the middle of the ocean where this rave is taking place. There is a ton of raving going on here, which initially kind of turned me off a bit. But as the years went by, I think it's just even more ridiculous and stupid in a good way that there's so much raving going on, and I'm guessing that they must have lifted that raving idea from the Blade opening where everyone's at the rave and the blood comes down. But he goes to the island and he has to do battle with vampires. He gets armed with all these new weapons. That he goes to this weapons specialist. There's actually a lot of fun kills in this and some pretty decent effects. A little dodgy CGI here and there, but you'd be surprised at some of the practical effects that are in here, and some of the gore is actually pretty well done. Now, I do wish that both Frog Brothers were on this mission together, but at the end, the Frog Brothers do team up once again. I'm not going to give anything away about that. It does deliver on the promise of bringing the Frog Brothers back to do battle against vampires. And there's some pretty great Corey one-liners in here as well.
How I'm going to break your neck.
Still shreds.
And pretty clever, actually. So I like that aspect of it. There's some flashbacks, of course, to the first movie where they show Sam, some endearing moments, and apparently in this movie Sam has passed away. Now, the first time that I saw Lost Boys: The Thirst, I was initially very disappointed that Corey Haim did not join the cast. It was pretty cool that we got the Frog Brothers back, but I couldn't understand why they would not have included him, especially because The Tribe, the movie that came before this, had that post-credit scene which featured Corey Haim in a cameo. Now, in this scene, if I remember correctly, I think that Sam was turned already. He was a vampire. So I'm not sure how that would have played out. Could have been interesting, but apparently Corey was asked to join The Thirst, and he declined. I don't know if he was sick at the time or having problems with drugs or just didn't like the script, but he had apparently signed up for the next movie that was never made that would have followed and been a sequel to The Thirst. So he ended up passing away 4 months into production of The Thirst. So his story to me is very tragic, and I have always felt very bad for both of the two Coreys and a lot of the things that they went through in Hollywood with addiction and abuse. But anyway, this film, The Thirst, I think, is a pretty solid sequel. Now, especially if you look at it through the lens of how movies are being made nowadays, how sequels to 80s movies are being made, I think that most of the ones that are coming out now are pretty terrible. When you take that knowledge with you of what they're doing now and destroying franchises, at least in my opinion, and you go back 14 years ago and you check out Lost Boys: The Thirst, this actually feels pretty fresh. It does put Edgar Frog front and center. We did want more of the Frog Brothers, but they team up at the end and they deliver on the promise. A lot more than can be said for a lot of stuff they're putting out now, where they sort of shove some of the main characters into the background, or they give them bad cameos, or the movie is just very poorly written. You might find out yourself that The Thirst is actually a lot more fun than you might have ever thought or given it credit for. At the very end of The Thirst, I found it very intriguing that we have a new storyline developing with the Frog Brothers, and also this friend of Edgar Frog's, this girl who works at the comic shop. She's a pretty solid addition to the film, and it looks like she was going to play a bigger role in the next film, which shows that the Lost Boys would indeed be tackling a whole lycanthrope, werewolf threat. It really plays out more like a Lost Boys comic book, something you might have bought at the comic shop around that time. I think that they were making the Frog Brothers comic books, and they could have really taken this thing far, I think, if the Tribe would not have been such a dud. If they would have done a sequel to The Thirst and they had a little more money, maybe a little better script. This script, believe me, this is not a great movie by any means. It is just fun. It doesn't have a great script. It's sort of stupid. I like all of that stuff. I, of course, would have loved a full-on legit Lost Boys movie made with the care of the original, but I don't think that we would ever get anything like that. In fact, I've heard that they were thinking about remaking the Lost Boys with a female cast. So the thing to remember here is I think that they still have time. Corey Feldman could easily reprise the role of Edgar Frog and Jameson Newlander as well. We could pick this thing up and continue the story. I think that that would be a really good idea, and I would like to hear a little bit of hype about getting Corey Feldman back in the role, because I think there's a lot of fun to still be had with the Frog Brothers. Both are still alive. I know that Corey Feldman wanted to reprise the role of Tommy Jarvis in a Friday the 13th sequel, made now. Now, how awesome would that be? They're not making films that honor the originals and give us the attention towards the main characters that we love so much. I mean, look at Luke Skywalker. Look at all of those characters in the Star Wars sequels. Very disappointing. I feel in a way like Lost Boys: The Thirst has a similar sort of vibe in the way that it's done to Cobra Kai, which I think is probably the best sequel to an 80s property that I've seen. They give all the care to all the lead characters that we love, and when I first started off Cobra Kai, I thought, I don't care about these kids, just give me, Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence and Dutch and all of those guys. Next thing you know, by the end of the first season of Cobra Kai, I was totally down with the teen characters as well this time. They gave everyone their moments to shine and made the younger characters very endearing. So I say we've got a pretty good double feature right here with The Watchers and Lost Boys: The Thirst. I'm very curious what all of you might think about both of these movies, especially this one. Hey, if you want to call me out on how much you think this movie sucks, please do so. But in the meantime, give it a shot if you haven't seen it already, and I will see you next time.
Broken walls that scream.